excited to be on this journey about using AI to improve my teaching, improve our students' writing skills. And what I've learned over the last year and a half is that the level of quality that that AI can produce with all of the things from invention, organization, design, style, tone, particularly in professional writing courses and or technical writing is improving. And so I feel very kind of convicted in that if this is something that AI can do well, reasonably well, it's not certainly perfect, and there's a lot of questions I think we should be asking. But why would our students not use it? Why would the workplace not take advantage of that? And if the answer is yes, then we should be teaching it, or at least helping students to understand it better. Yes, one thing that I've learned over the past year is that, again, it can be something that can help our students learn better, write better. And if that's the case, how then does that affect teaching and assessment? So this summer, I was really challenged to and worked with CTE to create a literacy skills rubric for helping me design courses, design assessments, and really help me learn, I should say, how to teach generative AI, particularly in writing courses. And so starting with basic questions like, well, what are the literacy skills that our students need? And the hard part is, well, how do we define those, particularly in our disciplines? And then what do our courses teach? How do we teach and assess these skills? And I want to show you just real quickly, I'm going to provide a link to this in the handout, but there's a page in this particular resource. This was shared with me by one of my colleagues earlier, I think last week. And I thought this was kind of an interesting statistic here about the importance of AI skills to employers. And again, I don't think that we can get around the fact that our students are going to be expected to have these skills. And the question for us becomes, what are the skills, particularly as they relate to our discipline? How do we define them? How do we assess them? And so I have worked quite a bit on assessment at the program and college level. And what has been something I have found just so helpful is the AAC&U value rubrics, because if you've ever had to participate in an assessment project, it can be just really daunting to think about how you define the different levels of learning. So for example, how do you define information literacy? How do you define critical thinking? How do you define problem solving? And the Association of Colleges and Universities, American Association of Colleges and Universities, has done these value rubrics, which is a great place to start understanding how those proficiency levels are defined. And so they've done a lot of the heavy lifting for us with that. So inspired by that, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if there was something like that for generative literacy, AI literacy? So over the summer, and if you've got the handout, you should be able to just click on the link. All right, so what this is a rubric that I created over the summer with help from several colleagues or input from several colleagues that represents different levels of AI literacy. And the goal here is to help faculty members get started with thinking about how AI literacy could be incorporated into their own courses or into assessment. And like the AAC&U rubrics, having a place to start. So it's rather long. You can see it's 14 pages. But the goal, I mean, if you looked at AAC&U, it's like 30 pages. The goal is that there are levels that are defined, and it becomes a starting point for a faculty member to use and then to modify as they see fit for uses in their courses. So it really just begins with, well, what are the AI literacy skills that my students will need? Where might they use these in the future, in either future courses as part of their academic career and especially part of their professional career? And then how will I teach and assess those? And so this is organized by level of tool proficiency. So I'm sorry, by levels of complexity, I should say, starting with just tool proficiency. And so, how are you using this or how are you understanding how the different tools work, their pros, cons, really kind of more technical skills. But as you move through the rubric, the levels increase in level of difficulty and or complexity in thought. So you've got, how do you actually use them to get the outputs that you're looking for? How well do they work? Prompt engineering, for example, might be one that our students, we could actually teach and our students could become proficient in. Evaluating output, and this is, I know, something that we've been talking about quite a bit last year, is how do we know that the output that we're getting from AI is accurate? Is it reliable? Can we trust it? And really working through some critical analysis with the students. So you're honing those critical thinking skills with them, but you're using the the tool of AI to help get you there. So as we go through this, you can just see different ways that you could again define AI literacy for your courses. Workflow, for example, might be one. I hadn't really thought about this that much until I read a couple of books on how AI is being used to streamline workflow or to improve collaboration, whether it be in the classroom or in the workplace. And so especially with classes where there's projects involved, capstones, or even if the students are doing internships or any kind of teaching and learning that requires, again, collaboration or workflow. So again, I was kind of wanted to show you this so you have access to it. You can certainly download it and modify any of these levels of proficiency as you see fit for your course. My courses are writing courses, so I'm focusing quite a bit on technical communication. How will my students use it to help them with the writing process, from, invention or brainstorming to drafting, organization of information, outlining, and actually starting drafts, editing, all the way through the writing process. And then even just ethical uses. So working with your students or even assessing how well they are identifying limits and risks or the trade-offs of AI use, and attribution. And I want to talk to you about that more in just a minute, because I created something else that may help simplify the process a little bit for our students, because it can become kind of daunting to try to attribute every single place and prompt and time that you used AI. If you're having a conversation with it, basically, or you're using it throughout the process, it can be a little hard to do. And I think that if we can come up with some ways that simplify the process, that may be helpful. And then the last one, which I'm still adding to this, but actually, that's not last one. Second last one is reflection, and really just thinking about how do we help our students articulate a position about AI that is more than just talking points that they've heard from other people, or from what they think is true or accurate, but may not have actually had any experience with it. And I'm really trying to help my own students build a lifelong learning reflection based on their uses of AI to identify a position that's based on their own experience as the evidence for it. knowing that that can change. As I share my position with them, it changes based on my experiences with it. But I think just being able to be aware, self-aware of what it is that they think about it, and how it can be useful based on their own experience, helps them learn things like writing a compelling argument, for example, or articulating a compelling argument for an audience. Okay, on this handout, I toyed with the idea of just cleaning it up and not having any comments and any of the stuff at the bottom. But then I thought, well, this is kind of the best part, right? So the comments and things on the right are just different teaching strategies. But I've also heard back from some colleagues about how they might use it, or how they might integrate any of these rows or levels of proficiency into their classes. So I kept it in here. I kept the teaching strategies that were offered by the colleagues that I reached out to, and thought maybe it would be helpful for you to consider different ways that colleagues are incorporating this into their teaching. Okay. Let me go to the next one, and I'll just drop this in the chat, because one of my colleagues that I met with a couple of times, or at least once, and I think we emailed back and forth, was, let me just put this in. The titles, yes. Teaching with AI by Jose Bowen. I read that book cover to cover and highlighted almost everything in it. It is fantastic. It really, matter of fact, before I even started on the rubric, I wanted to read through that book to just get inspired. And instead of, I was a little overwhelmed at first because there's so much in there to learn, but I really came away from it inspired by how many different ways that generative AI can be used to facilitate teaching and learning, and even assessment. So highly, highly recommend it. Okay. Does everybody see this handout? So
can the name and author be put into the chat so that we can
do that?
Thank you.
Teaching.
Oh, perfect. Your co-host got it.
We got it. Great. Thank you. Yeah, and it's a pretty easy read, because he's got just lots of suggestions and ideas for assessment and teaching strategies. So it's really enjoyable. He's also on a podcast, the Teaching in Higher Ed. It's the Bonnie Stachowiak podcast, and that's where, and we've had him at A&M speak too. I mean, he's just really incredible. But I would highly recommend going to that podcast. I want to say it was in June this past summer. And listening to him talk about the book and all of the things that he's learning by using it in his own classrooms or teaching situations. Okay, so another challenge that I've really just been convicted about is helping our students ask the kinds of questions when they're doing anything. So it may not just be with AI, but they're researching a topic, or they're developing an idea, to ask the kinds of questions that will move the needle. In other words, critical thinking questions that will help them better understand something, uncover something that they might not have been thinking about. And so I created a multi-level decision framework, again, kind of inspired by some of the other tools and frameworks that I've seen, about just breaking things down into levels, starting with fairly simple, moving to more complex levels of thought, so that they're asking the kinds of questions that will help them make good decisions. And so it really, which ones to use really just depends on your learning outcomes and your discipline. Like, what are the kinds of things that you want your students to learn, and what kinds of questions might they ask to help them evaluate the process or even the output. And just even sometimes it's simple things like, well, what are the trade-offs if I use this for this particular purpose? What might I gain or lose by using AI to complete this step? And what are the other things that I could consider? And so just having some questions to start with and putting those in a framework may help faculty or instructors to identify different levels of difficulty with AI use and really developing our students' critical thinking skills. So I was thinking about, and I just finished this, so it's kind of fresh, but I was thinking about for my own classes, something I might do with this is generate some scenarios. And I actually popped this into, I think it was ChatGPT recently, and said, can you suggest some scenarios that would prompt students to consider different kinds of questions that might help them navigate the issues represented in this rubric. And so getting them to think about different kinds of contexts or scenarios and something that I might not have the time to create myself. So I did get a list of some scenarios, and that's kind of where I am. I'm thinking that this would be a really good strategy for the students to use either in class or as part of an online discussion that I could pop into Canvas and then move forward with that. Okay, I use a reflection writing prompt in my classes to help students think through the writing process and also to um, help them work on their writing skills and basically joined with lifelong learning. In other words, what is the best case you can make that you are a lifelong learner? And I always have provided lots of prompts. We do some activities to help them think about, well, how do you even define lifelong learning? How do I know if I am a lifelong learner? What would be the best kinds of evidence to support lifelong learning? And learning AI, I think, is a great opportunity for them to develop those lifelong learning skills and then reflect on them. Like what is the process that you use to improve those skills? And so this is an assignment that they have to think about. So how have they learned it? What are the skills that they have cultivated to improve lifelong learning as demonstrated through AI? How would you communicate that again with your own experiences? And so one of the things I always tell my students about doing essays like this is they're probably not going to be able to identify something that someone hasn't already thought about, already. In other words, it may not be original in the main ideas of what is lifelong learning and what does it look like. But what's original to them is their own journey of how they learned these skills, how they used them, how they adapted them, how they evaluated them, what they think about it, and how all of that contributes to lifelong learning. I always tell my students, no one else has your story. So what are the skill sets that you have acquired over the past semester, over the past year, as you've learned AI, as you've thought about it, as you have become more familiar with it, that demonstrates that you can be trusted to continue learning even outside the classroom, and particularly when you get into the workplace. So I have a couple of, I'll just pick up this one because this is one I'm using right now in my own classes, but a couple of uh, tools or worksheets that will help the students map their uses of AI. And actually creates a journal, journal entries, lessons learned, that kind of thing, so that they are recording kind of like in a lab. When you're doing a lab, you have the lab report and you're taking notes and you're recording what you're using and making observations as you go along. And at the end, you synthesize, the bigger ideas that came out of that. So this is an example. When we did this in class, I worked with them on what it might look like to complete this journal and or this I call it a writing skills debriefing journal. Okay. All right, the last piece, and it looks like this should be able to share it, is this, oops, don't think, did I get it? Did the AI use come through?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so the inspiration of this was the Creative Commons site that generates for you an attribution statement for how you want to use your work and how you want others to use it and have access to it and things like that. So this isn't nearly as sophisticated as that. But over the past year, I've noticed that when teaching students about citations and attribution, they always want a prescription. How would you cite this type of source using this type of style, APA, for example, or MLA. And it's nice to be able to point to those and say, okay, this is how they do it, and this is the process, or these are the ways that you should be citing that. And there are a number of templates that I've have access to that I've created or modified for my own use in my courses. But I've also found that they're really cumbersome to cite properly every single way that you're using AI to complete a task. It may not be realistic. And so my thought was, what if we had something that was simple that either students could use in citing their own work? And if I can go back to, let me see, I think I have an example on the literacy rubric. Is it this one? Multi-level? Yeah. So you can see I put a little, label here that would point back to this particular table. Oh, where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. But the thought would be to identify just different levels that you find acceptable for the uses in your course and the things that students are generating, and then describe them. And so these are just basic levels here, but yours could certainly be much more descriptive. Your examples would probably be very different from these. And then, maybe more description of what that would mean. So maybe, you have assignments where you're saying, maybe levels 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, you could put into the assignment, and then students could refer back to this sheet to say, okay, she's okay or he's okay with Grammarly and other types of basic editing, but not brainstorming or, full generation, using this to organize and edit, etc. So I think that the most important part would be right in here, the example and the tools used to help your students understand what you find acceptable. And then these are kind of basic here. So yours would certainly maybe look different depending on what your assignments are. But just to have something that ties back to a rubric or a label use where students are acknowledging based on the assignment and what you've said is acceptable, their use there. So they could either just put the icon and maybe a description of the tool, the date, and then basically as I've done down here. And at some point, I think it would be like the Creative Commons would be kind of cool, is to have the icon actually point to something. So if they had the label, and these aren't standard, I mean, this would just be very, unique to the particular course. But if they, if somebody clicked on it, it would go like the Creative Commons link to the description of how AI was used and maybe the prompts that were used for that. Okay, I would like to hear from you. I have two sets of discussion questions for you. One is just what are the literacy skills that are relevant in your courses? Or how do you plan to teach these? How might it facilitate what you're either already doing, or how might it be leveraged to reach your student learning outcomes more successfully? And then I also want to ask you about the second set of questions. So I'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to stop sharing and then we'll come back. Your thoughts or challenges, even just with AI literacy in your discipline.
I'll ask if
Okay.
I guess kind of a big question I still have that I think we're figuring out that what so I do a writing course, a W course. What does that mean? They haven't really updated the standards for what does it mean now that they have to write so much and get feedback on it? Or now that we're in the age of AI, what exactly does that mean? Is it still the same level of writing feedback, or is it, well, no, I want you to generate prompts and I want you to edit the essay using this? And any thoughts on how to meld these two?
Yes, and I wish I could give you a more definitive answer. I will tell you, I'm in the process now of designing a new undergraduate course for international affairs for our new degree program. And one of the challenges, or one of the prompts from my boss and the committee, was we want this to eventually become a W course. And I thought, okay, well, good. I've done those before. I know what the process is like. Went to the university website and, starting to jump through all the hoops of what that's going to look like, and reached out to the committee about that. And I will tell you, nothing's changed on what the requirements are from the university about what that's going to look like. And I think it will have to change, or at least incorporate what is this going to mean about, how we teach it, what those skills are. And that's why I'm so just excited about thinking about AI literacy, because I think we have to think about it if our students are going to be using this in the workplace. And so here's kind of my take on that. If AI is going to affect how we write, it's certainly going to affect how we instruct. And this is a huge can of worms. So we've got to get our head around what are those skills that are useful to our students as we're preparing them, that outlive our course, right? And what might that look like in the W course? I don't think we have a definitive answer yet to that, but we should be thinking about it. So I'm glad you asked that, because like I said, I'm teaching that. I will say this though. I built AI into the course that I'm designing, and it's even in the title. So it's writing with AI. I have not submitted it. It's on my calendar to submit in about 2 weeks. And I have told the committee members at the Bush School anyway, not so much moving up the chain, but that I am teaching writing with AI. And I was pleasantly surprised at the enthusiasm with that, instead of, any kind of, matter of fact, it was also, I was glad to hear the level of enthusiasm with, we need to learn more about this. We really need to learn how to use it, when to use it, all of the questions that we've been asking the past year or so. I think a lot of our colleagues are starting to ask those too. So great question. I'm going to have to give a lot more thought to that. I am in a cohort though, with CTE and the university. And this might be one of my projects that I propose to do, is what is that going to look like for our W courses? Can we establish some guidelines to help instructors plan and deliver those? Because there's a rubric, but there's no AI built into the rubrics. And maybe that's the next step. Great question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sort of appending onto that, I definitely suggest having the students be involved in the conversation in terms of kind of like surveys. So when you're talking about, how much this is used, it would be good to get feedback of, okay, how much time did you spend using this AI? How much time did you spend actually writing? And that can give a better sense for, because this is a whole new world for them, and it's also going to be something that I think is going to need consistent feedback from everybody, because this is just we're not in a paradigm shift of information age to something else, I don't think, but I do think we're in a paradigm shift of a subsection, I guess, of the AI portion of the information age, and it's something that we're just going to have to keep having conversations. So conversations like this one, I think are absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to know that this is not going to stop, for a while, if it ever does. I'm not coming as a teacher. I'm a research librarian. And I work with upper level students, and I work with faculty and staff. And AI is coming in hot and fast in terms of all of the questions and what things are going on. So one thing that is really nice is that everybody is active. For whether it comes to government, whether it comes to talking about AI ethics and all of that, is that you do have, I would say, pretty good buy-in from the community all around. Generally, executives are pretty happy about it as well. And then, of course, the students are fascinated.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that has helped me get a handle on some of the new things is to start with what's old. In other words, what do they already know? So you were asking, you had a comment about how much time are you spending, looking things up. Well, now we're really talking about invention, right? And brainstorming. And before AI, we wouldn't have thought twice about spending an enormous amount of time on invention before you ever write anything. Matter of fact, I think that's the problem. Is oftentimes we don't spend enough time thinking and kind of incubating is, I think, one of the words that I used to use. That just chewing on it for a while. And so if you're incorporating AI in that process, great. I mean, you're still inventing, but you're thinking perhaps, how do I engage AI to help me understand this better? That, I'm still spending the same amount of time, but maybe I'm getting feedback or answers much more quickly, or it's taking me on a journey I might not have otherwise gone because I wouldn't have even known to ask that. The question that I'm now asking, because it's told me something that I wasn't expecting. And then again, well, how do you evaluate that? What are the trade-offs? We've been teaching our students that all along to evaluate, and now it just is with a new tool. So I usually try to come back to what were we already doing that this is now either accelerating, maybe challenging a little bit, but helping our students see that and really, kind of work with it. So and I will say, like you, I'm seeing a lot more enthusiasm and acceptance than I did a year ago. And maybe it's because, and maybe it's just those of us at this meeting, we've quickly realized we cannot police this. Like, none of us wants to be that instructor that just is put in the position of having to figure out, is this AI generated or not? I think we still need to be doing that, but then, what
AI can't tell.
Yeah.
It consistently can't tell, and there's already been some use cases where like police arrested someone based off of, the computer identified them, and they very visually were not the same person. I also just recommend having just little stuff that little resources to point towards about the limits of AI, because AI are limited by their data sets, and they're also like generative AI, like ChatGPT and everything, is focused more on delivering something quickly than delivering it accurately. And that's where you see, you know, what's called AI hallucinations and everything. Something that I really recommend that I went to the Texas Library Association conference a few months ago, and at one of the talks that I went to, there was a video played. It's only like 3 to 4 minutes on YouTube. It's called AI Ain't I a Woman? Yes, but and it shows all of these different advanced, you know, image-focused AI misidentifying Black women as men. And it's a really cool video, but to me it's just one of the biggest responsibilities I think that we have is to go, hey, it may summarize this for you, but this is like ChatGPT or all that, it should not be Cliff Notes ever. You know, it's not, it doesn't have, you have to have the human component to review it. And I just think that is so essential to say sort of upfront, simply because we as a society have grown up with all of this science fiction that pictures AI in a much more human way than it currently is, or I believe ever will be. But that's my 2 cents on that. I'll stop dominating.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, and I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts and something actually that Courtney said that makes me think could be a useful conversation starter with our students. And that is, and I don't know how, if they've used Cliff Notes, I don't even know if those things are around anymore. I'm assuming that they are, but I'm just thinking about my own. I'm going to confess here. Yes, I use Cliff Notes sometimes when I had to do a lot of reading on you know, either topics or maybe it was literature that I didn't quite fully understand that made it easier for me to understand. But I will also say, how much of that literature did I remember or really appreciate later if I relied too heavily on the Cliff Notes? And so that might be, you know, a way to encourage students that are struggling to understand something that, yes, AI may be like a Cliff Note for you, but it's not going to, you're not going to internalize it if that's what you're primarily relying on. But one last thing I wanted to bring up, because I thought this is just a really interesting set of questions I was able to ask my students. I put it into the discussion board in Canvas a couple of weeks ago, and I got a lot of really good responses from my students. And I was inspired by the Olympics. And so when I was watching the Olympics and especially seeing the different athletes in ads, which was kind of odd, you know, they're selling products and then, you know, seeing like professional basketball teams competing in this and that. And I remember when the Olympics was a purely amateur sport. And, you know, we could talk a lot about what kinds of changes happened that made that change, you know, and was that good or bad or whatever. But my thought was, by allowing professional athletes to compete in the sport now, hasn't that, whether you like it or not, raised the bar on what we would expect the performance to look like? And I think that's what AI is going to do in academia, and or if you're wondering, even in the workplace, does it raise the bar on what the output should look like? And maybe that's your justification, saying, you know what, use it, but I'm going to expect a much better product because you have access to this and it can do all these things than I would have, not only, you know, before and or by the end of the day, instead of getting you to the end of the week, which isn't always a good thing. But right, because we're going to increase our work levels. But I don't know, consider it. It might be a good conversation starter with your students. Okay, any other questions? Let's see, I'll check the chat real quick. All right, guys, this was fun.
Thank you.